Hey everybody, my name is Shell, and I just wanted to tell my abortion survivor story. So in 1987, my parents had two young boys who were 6 and 3, and at the time in Texas, there was just no work. All the work had dried up. So my parents, when they found out that they were pregnant with me, were really, really scared. They were already living in one of my grandfather's spare rental properties, and they didn't have any money. My dad didn't have a job. They just didn't know what they were going to do. So when they found that they were pregnant with me, they were in their early 30s, and just my mom was decided to get an abortion. They were Christian, but they were just poor and they didn't know what else to do. So my mom went to the abortion clinic, and she was on the table about to have the procedure when she felt like God was speaking to her, telling her, "Don't do this, you will regret this." So she ended up leaving, ran out of the room crying, never came back, left the place, and ended up having me. When I was born, I was one of the only girls in my family, very large family, so it was a pretty big surprise that I turned out to be female because they were told I was supposed to be a boy. So I've always just had a really wonderful relationship with my parents because of it. Because I really appreciated the fact that even though things were hard, they decided to keep me anyway, and they were ending up being very happy with the decision that they made. But it's really difficult to think about the fact that I almost wasn't here. I almost didn't have a voice. And so now I feel like it's my responsibility to speak out against the evils of abortion, because the truth is that they didn't want me to have a voice. They didn't want me to have existence at all because I was inconvenient for my parents. But it turns out that sometimes the hardest things and the most inconvenient things are the most rewarding things that we ever have to face. So I just want to go through a couple of the arguments for that I'm hearing a lot lately with this abortion movement that I just think are so false, and they're really setting women up to fail. One of the arguments they're using is that fetuses aren't humans. They're not really people, which, you know, that always makes me wonder, exactly when then do you think that the soul enters the body? When do we become people? Because I can tell you that the birth canal isn't some magical invention that just delivers souls into human bodies and gives us validation of any kind. It's just a body part. So being birthed doesn't give you any more rights than being inside the womb. So, and I always like to tell people, you know, well, if you have human DNA, and I just hate the idea that our argument now is based on viability and whether or not you're wanted, because that's such a slippery slope to say that you should only exist if other people want you to. Because there are people all the time that grow up and they end up disagreeing wholeheartedly with their parents. They don't speak to them, or they think that they make poor decisions. They don't agree with them at all. So the idea that at some point in your life your entire existence should be predicated on whether or not your parents think that you're worthy enough is just insane. And I would say that it's there. What I would tell people is that, do you really feel like there's a start date to human rights? You're either a human or you're not. You either have human DNA or you don't. You're an animal or you're a person. So the idea that there's some kind of magical start date to when human rights begin is insane to me. And every time in history that people have tried to say who's human and who isn't, despite scientific evidence to the contrary, it's come to become one of the most heinous acts in history known to man. We tried to say that black people weren't human at one point. They were only 3/5 of a person, and that became to be known as one of the greatest evils. Nazis tried to say that Jews weren't actually human. That became to be known as one of the great evils. And there have been countless people throughout history who believe in eugenics and all kinds of things that have said that disabled people aren't actually truly human, which is just insane as well. So I just don't see how this is going to be the one time in history where we draw lines as to who's human and who isn't, and it doesn't become known as one of the great atrocities in humankind. So the next thing I want to talk about is the act of abortion itself. So we tend to exist in this idea that out of sight, out of mind, because it's all taking place under the cover of belly skin. So we don't really think about how horrible it is. But I want you to really think about this. Think about you're in the fetal position, you're inside of the womb, and you're cozy and you're warm and you're growing, and you hear the calming sound of your mother's voice all day and her heartbeat, and then all of a sudden a device comes in and grabs your ankle. A pair of forceps is grabbed your ankle. You don't know what it is. You're trying to get away from it. And with Abby Johnson's story, we've seen this. We've seen this actually happen, where babies are trying to get away from the foreign invader inside of the womb, and desperately trying to get away from the threat, but they can't. So imagine that you're warm and cozy, and then those forceps grab your ankle, and then they start to pull, and now they're pulling hard, and now they're pulling harder, and it hurts. They pull so hard that they rip your leg right off of your body. Tendrils just exposed, nerve endings exposed. They've ripped your leg off of your body, and now it's coming back and it's got a hold of your wrist, and now it's pulling your arm. Now it's pulled your arm off of your body. So the idea that this barbaric act isn't occurring, or that it's masked by some idea of choice, is just insane to me. Imagine being a fetus and all of a sudden saline is being injected into the cavity that you are in. You're drowning, you're being burned on the inside and the outside. You're writhing, you're trying to get away from it, but to no avail. I mean, imagine being in that position. These are people with their own separate human DNA that can be exist away from their mothers, that if they were birthed, they would actually have a high percentage rate of living. So imagine these barbaric things that we're doing to these tiny humans, knowing that they can't defend themselves and they can't get away. And all of this is being predicated on the idea of choice. And so I would ask people out there, exactly how many choices do you need? And if a choice that you're given is something horrible, do you think it's a choice worth making? So women already have choices. If we put ourselves in the position where we know that human life can be created, we can use condoms and birth control, we can use IUDs and NuvaRings, we can use dental dams, we can pull out, we can use, and then if all of that fails, then we still have Plan B that can be used, which is controversial itself, but you know, I happen to believe that the life begins at the heartbeat. But anyway, so we have all of these choices, and then if all of those choices fail, then there's still Plan B. So the fact that you're telling women that there's an extra step of irresponsibility that we will tolerate shouldn't be something that we are pushing to our young girls and to women. We should be telling them that making and creating and shaping human life is a sacred responsibility that women shouldn't be so quick to devalue or give up. This is the one thing that we can do. We can shape who humans are. We can create actual people. We can grow them inside of our bodies, and women are so quick now because they think, well, men don't have to. Well, it isn't a situation of having to or having not to. It's a sacred thing that we get to do. It's a source of power that women have that we shouldn't be so quick to say isn't important, or we shouldn't be so quick to give up on, because it's incredible and it's something that men can't do. It's the one thing that men can't do that we can do, and yet we're so quick to say, well, it's not important or it's a burden. It's a magical, incredible thing that we have this amazing responsibility over, and quite frankly, we shouldn't be convincing or encouraging the women and girls in our society to give up so quickly on responsibility, because it's the responsibility of women that shapes men. It's the responsibility of women that encourages good traits in men and other people. We encourage them to take responsibility. We encourage them to be better people. We encourage them to be good dads. We have so much say over how our society is shaped, and yet we're gonna throw it in the trash because men don't have to, so they must have it better. I don't think so. I don't think that men have it better. And so I think that we shouldn't be talking to our women in this way. We shouldn't be talking to girls and telling them that they should abdicate their responsibilities and they should try to shirk them off, because that's the one thing that actually makes our society run well. The next thing I really want to talk about is the fact that abortion is negatively infecting our minority communities. More black children are now aborted than are born. And to me, the population's completely stagnated. And to me, that's horrible. Black people are only 13% of our population. They should be more than that. They should be more than that. 18 million black babies have been aborted since the 1970s. Think about all of those children that aren't alive. And to me, this is where the real racist argument comes into play. You've got people like Margaret Sanger, who founded Planned Parenthood, who has been on record multiple times saying how she really thinks about the black community. She purposely started this program and put it in poor communities because essentially, and here's the racist part of it, and this is what people never think about the left, and I want you to think about. They're essentially saying, hey, poor people and people of color, throw your children in the garbage because they were just going to be criminals anyway. That's essentially what they're saying. They cite the fact that, well, the crime rate's going down. That's due to abortion. This is this, and this is this, and that's all because of abortion. What they're really saying is people of color and minorities and poor people shouldn't have their children because those children are just going to be a burden to society anyways. When the truth of the matter is that imagine if you had taken those 18 million aborted black children, and instead of aborting them, you would encourage the mothers to have strength and confidence and responsibility and care for that life while it's in the womb. And then when you have the baby, to give it to a family that's going to give it nothing but opportunity and love and affection and education and all the things that you would want for them anyway. Imagine if 18 million black children had been given to families that gave them nothing but opportunity. We would see nothing but black people who are incredible agents of change and who would be changing the way the demographic is set up right now in education, academia, and all of the professionalism, because all of those people would have been given opportunities instead of being thrown in the trash and said they were just going to be criminals anyway, so just throw them away. They don't matter. That's racist. That's racist. Imagine if all of those children were here. They were productive members of our society. They should be here. All of those people who are aborted should be here. They should be accomplishing their dreams and doing what they set out to do. I have dreams. I've accomplished a lot in my life. I'm now running for city council and I'm really proud of it. But for you to blanketly say that all of those people would have just been a burden on society and wouldn't have been agents of change is just racist. I'm sorry, it just is. So I want you to really think about when you hear people making these abortion arguments, because to me they're just stereotypes. And the truth is that if we had been encouraging adoption instead of abortion, then all of those people would be alive and in better situations and more equipped to help people in their communities than they would be if they were just in a medical waste dump and incinerated. So that's why I think that we should be investing in prevention instead of investing in abortion. I feel like we should be giving all that federal funding not to Planned Parenthood but to community health centers that actually can provide things like contraceptives and breast exams and cancer screenings and all of the things that women need, because Planned Parenthood has admitted that they just outsource those things anyway. So why do we need to be giving more money to an organization? And it's not like the money, they say that it's not spent on abortion, but it's all going in the same bank account. Every dollar that the federal government gives them is a dollar that they don't, of their own money, that they don't have to spend on things like political donations. So if Planned Parenthood can afford to give $200,000 to a candidate, then why did we need to give them that $200,000? They could have just paid for it out of their own profits. So I really don't understand. If you have the money to spend on things like that, then you don't need money from taxpayers. That's just the cold hard truth, and there's nothing that they can say to counter that argument. Now, I am a Christian, and so I try not to bring my faith too much into the argument, but I will on this point because I feel like people are always trying to figure out what this human experience is, and to me it's pretty obvious. I believe that the human experience was created by God for souls to be born and created. This is where souls are born. They're fresh, they're minted, they're brand new, and the human experience is nothing but a shaping tool to create, to make you who you're meant to become. So when we pass away, when our lives are over, we're supposed to reach our full potential of God's plan so that when we rejoin who God is, we can fully enjoy His grace. So to me, I believe that souls don't exist before the human experience. God created this to shape us. We have trials and tribulations. We experience pain and loss and grief and all of these things, joy, happiness, love. All of these things are meant to shape who our soul is meant to be, who we're supposed to be as people. So to me, when you just throw bodies in the garbage, those are just countless souls that never get to realize their potential, never get to be who God planned them to be, never get to reach their potential outcome. So to me, it's one of the greatest tragedies about abortion is that we're just essentially saying that everything that you are as a person isn't really necessary. It isn't really vital to our human experience because if you were aborted, it wouldn't have really made a difference anyway. The world would be exactly the same. We'd get along just fine without you. To me, that is the most evil part of abortion. So one of the other things I want to talk about is the fact that these late-term abortions that these politicians have been pushing, saying that they're medically necessary, when we all know that they're not. The truth is that when you get a late-term abortion, you have to birth that baby anyway. There's no magical pill that makes that fetus all of a sudden tiny and you don't have to give birth to it. You still have to birth that baby. So imagine how horrible it is. If you've got to push that baby out anyway, why would you want it to be dead? I mean, if you've got to do it anyway, why not let the baby live and give it to somebody who is going to take care of them and give them nothing but love and opportunity? Why is that something that you can't do? Why would you rather give birth to a dead baby than give birth to a live one that you can give an actual life, love, and opportunity? You're essentially saying that, and to me this is one of the evil things about the abortion argument, is that they're saying that the only things that matter to your life is whether you're viable and wanted. So first of all, think of what a slippery slope that is to say that you should only exist if you're viable. That is a slippery slope with legal arguments. People can make that apply to all kinds of horrible things. Not only that, but the wanted argument. You should only exist if your mother wants you. Even if their mother didn't even have to keep you and raise you, she could just give you up for adoption. You have to be wanted to exist. Think about how horrible of an argument that is. Think about all of the people who end up realizing when they're older what terrible people their parents are and they don't want anything to do with them, yet their right to exist is still predicated on the decisions of that person. If a person has their own separate human DNA, then why should you have dominion over that? Yes, you do have to carry that baby in your body, but that's not just your body anymore. It's another person's body as well. And that's part of the sacred, awesome responsibility of being female, is that I think God intentionally made women a little smarter than men for this reason, because we have to make serious choices about who gets to live and who gets to die. And if we start saying that people don't matter anymore, then who all could that apply to? So, I mean, people should really, I think about that, because it's kind of scary. The next thing I want to talk about too is the fact that the birth canal doesn't grant you a soul. I know I mentioned this a minute ago, but really think about that. If you believe that you have a soul, if you believe that there's something inherent that makes you you, then ask yourself when that becomes part of you. Because if there's a point in time where your soul isn't a part of you, then think about what that could mean for other areas of your life. Does it ever leave you before you die? I mean, what could that possibly mean? And one of the things that this comes back to for me is the argument about selfishness and selflessness. It is impossible to have an abortion and say that you're selfless, because abortion is the most selfish thing you could do. It's saying that what you want is more important than the life of another person. Your convenience outweighs the soul of another person, the person's right to exist. And the government isn't even saying that you have to keep that child. They're just saying, we're just asking for you to not murder it. So I don't understand. It's impossible to be selfless while doing something so selfish. And if you're doing something that is selfish, then ask yourself, when has the moral thing to do, the moral choice, ever been the selfish choice? It never is. The moral choice is always predicated on putting others before yourself. That's what morality is based on. That's why it exists. It's necessary. Is to govern our reactions amongst other people. So if the moral thing is to always put another before yourself, then the moral thing cannot be to put yourself first. It just doesn't work that way. So I feel like people forget about that. Another point of abortion that bothers me is people act like because you don't see it, you don't actually see the abortion, it's happening within someone's body, that death doesn't hurt. Death still hurts. No matter how old you are, how formed you are, you have pain receptors in your body. Death hurts. Remember when I talked about that argument earlier about imagine being in the womb and those instruments coming and ripping your limbs off? Abortion hurts people. It causes pain. So how can we argue that the right thing to do is to cause innocent people pain? I don't understand that. Of course, there are like a zillion arguments against abortion, and these are just some of mine, but as a person that wasn't even supposed to be here, that was supposed to die by abortion, I just feel like it's my duty to raise my voice and to let people know how evil this is. And it's all, and if it comes down to you that you're just not comfortable with the pro-life argument because you don't like telling people what they should be doing with their bodies, just remember this. If you saw somebody, okay, let's talk about an analogy really quick. So imagine that you are standing on a stage in front of a red curtain that's drawn, and a person stands next to you and they hand you a bow and arrow and they say, behind this curtain, there's a target. Now, I'm going to let you shoot the bow and arrow through the curtain, and if you hit anywhere on the target, we will give you $3 million. Would you do it? You'd do it, right? Everyone would do it. Yeah, I'll shoot that arrow and see if I hit the target. I want $3 million. Now imagine that the person hands you the bow and arrow and says, same conditions, same thing. If you hit anywhere on the target, we will give you $3 million. But there's a 1% chance that there's a person standing in front of the target. 1%. Do you do it? No. Nobody would do it. Nobody would fire a bow and arrow, possibly killing another person just for money, just for themselves, just for convenience in their own lives. They wouldn't do it. Why? Because nobody wants to take another person's life. Now imagine abortion. There's a 1% chance that that is a person. There's just a 1% chance. Even if there was just a 1% chance that that's a person with a soul, and this is wrong, and you are wrong, and this is evil, would you still do it?